raise questions, help each other, and hold our institutions accountable. Over the last 14 years, the Tribune, because of your support, has been essential and even more relevant source in the most challenging times. Now, as we turn 15, the Tribune is making another bold step for Texans. The Texas Tribune is an award-winning model for the nation for providing good, reliable, trusted information to our communities, for the ways we collaborate and innovate across the media and the news ecosystem, and for our focused investment in Texas and local journalism across the state. I am thrilled to announce today that we are doubling down on what we do best. We know firsthand and up close the challenges facing local news. We are moving to be the solution. We are creating a network of local newsrooms across the state. We will build newsrooms in communities for communities. Our journalists will live locally and be a part of our communities. We will be starting with Waco and Austin. Okay, Austin, and expand across the state. We are not doing this alone. We will partner and work with our colleagues to energize and strengthen the whole news ecosystem. As you know well, good, independent, local journalism matters. None of this is possible without you. Thank you all for your support of the Tribune. It matters to us. You are our community. You are our family. And today, you've brought your energy to the Texas Tribune Festival 2024. This is the place to listen, learn new ideas, get up close and engage directly with speakers, expand your thinking, share realities, and build bridges across differences. This is a space of curiosity, renewal, and fellowship. Over the next 2 days, I hope you'll meet new people and explore what is also unfamiliar to you. What can the mariachi tell us about Texas? Alondra Nelson talking about AI and regulation. Karl Rove sharing his perspectives on the elections. Mayor Ron Nirenberg in conversation with Evan Smith. Governor Glenn Youngkin from Virginia, and of course, today's important conversation with Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Watch our amazing journalists like Michelle Martin, Ali Velshi, Anna Palmer, Matthew Watkins, Sewell Chan, David Drucker, Katie Fang, and so many more. Meet the Texas Tribune journalists and staff. Take a moment to meet each other and share stories. And please show your Texas kindness and respect to each other and all of our speakers. And remember, wear comfortable clothes and comfortable shoes. Thank you for joining us. Now, you're gonna have to wait while I do a little bit of housekeeping because we gotta acknowledge all of our sponsors. Let me start with our premier sponsors, Arnold Ventures, BP America, Chevron, Google, PepsiCo, Raise Your Hand Texas, 6th Street, the Sumners Foundation, and Visit Fort Worth. And our big thank you to our major sponsors, AARP Texas, Builders, Central Texas Regional Mobility Authority, HCA Healthcare, Houston Landing, Intersect Power, Invern Energy, Methodist Healthcare Ministries of Texas, Panacea Collective, Solar Energy Industries Association, Texas Monthly, UT Houston School of Public Health. Our supporting sponsors, American Health Association, Anheuser-Busch, Association of Texas Professional Educators, Athletic Brewing Company, I gotta take a breather here, Austin Community College, Barron Adler, Clough, and Otto, the Beer Alliance of Texas, Bipartisan Policy Center, Bookshop.org, Comcast, NBC Universal, the Commit Partnership, Energy Foundation, Every Texas, HEB, Hobby School of Public Affairs, the University of Houston, Houston Endowment, Jackson Walker, JP Morgan Chase, LBJ School of Public Affairs, Livigy, McGuire Woods Consulting, Meadows Mental Health Policy Institute, Encore, Perplexity, RISA, Rice Master of Social Policy Evaluation, St. David's Healthcare, Texas AFT, Texas Association of Community Colleges, Texas Council for Developmental Disabilities, Texas Regional Bank, Texas State Historical Association, Texas Almanac, Texas State Technical College, the Bulwark, the Texas Lyceum, Trellis Foundation, UT Press, World Education Services, and a big thank you to our media sponsors, the Austin American Statesman, the Austin Chronicle, the Guardian, Austin PBS, El Paso Matters, Houston Landing, Fort Worth, KSAT, ProPublica, Punchbowl News, San Antonio Report, and Texas Standard and KUT News. And to our student media partners, you are our future, so thank you for supporting this event too. Accent Student Media, Baylor Lariat, Hilltop Views, and the University Star. So thank you all, and it is now my pleasure to invite the Tribune co-founder, Evan Smith, to the stage.
Hey. Thank you, Sonal. Hello, everybody. It is so nice to be here at the Checks Notes 14th Texas Tribune Festival. How amazing. This year, it is once again my pleasure to introduce our opening keynote, a conversation with the Honorable Gretchen Whitmer, the 49th Governor of Michigan, possibly the better of two Texas-Michigan matchups this weekend. Possibly. Possibly. First elected to lead the Great Lakes State in 2018 and reelected in 2022, she signed 5 balanced budgets and more than 1,250 bipartisan bills into law. She counts among her accomplishments cutting taxes for seniors and working families, investing in public education, lowering the cost of job training and higher ed, cutting red tape for permitting and redevelopment, and on brand, fixing the damn roads. Some 20,000 lane miles worth and counting. Not mentioned in her official bio, but absolutely of note, especially in this moment. After the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, Governor Whitmer led the charge for and signed a bill ensuring abortion access in Michigan. A native of Lansing, a graduate of Michigan State University and Michigan State's College of Law, she briefly practiced law before successfully running for a seat in the legislature in 2000. She was all of 29. She served 5 years in the State House and 9 years in the State Senate, the last 4 of those as minority leader, and 6 months as the prosecuting attorney of Ingham County, Lansing, before running for governor. Her star has been on the rise for some time. After delivering the Democratic response to President Trump's State of the Union in 2000, she was on the short list to be Joe Biden's running mate later that year. This summer, when talk of President Biden stepping aside heated up, Governor Whitmer's name was floated as a possible Democratic Party nominee. When Vice President Harris became the consensus choice to replace him, the governor was again on a short list of possible ticket mates. If you don't have her on your bingo card of future potential presidential candidates, well, you may be the only one. This year, Governor Whitmer published her first book, True Gretch, What I've Learned About Life, Leadership, and Everything in Between. As the title suggests, it's a memoir. And I'll tell you that in recounting her story, the governor comes across as extremely relatable. Never more than when, in her Hellcat teenage years, she drinks so much at a football game that she passes out between 2 cars in the high school parking lot and then throws up on the principal. Who among us, right? But it's also a very, very smart instruction manual for her words, getting shit done. You can buy a signed copy of the book in our festival bookstore, and I encourage you to do that. We are so lucky that she agreed to come to Austin to talk about the book and this extraordinary moment in her state and our country. Please join me in welcoming Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Governor, microphone, good. Governor, welcome. Great to see you.
Thank you. I'm so glad you got the throwing up on my principal thing out of the way.
Well, you put it in the book. You held the door open. I walked through it. That's how that goes. Yeah.
And well done.
Good.
Thank you.
We have a lot to talk about today, but I know that before we start, you want to say a word about the terrible news yesterday in Georgia. I'd like to give you an opportunity to talk about that.
Yeah, I just think it's important to, acknowledge the pain that people are feeling right now. Sadly, we've seen events like this take place with great frequency in this country and only in this country, and it is heartbreaking. And one of the things I learned when we were confronted with a similar situation in Michigan was, I called Dan Malloy, was the governor of Connecticut during Sandy Hook, and I said, Dan, I'm headed to the scene of a school shooting. What do I do? And he gave me some great advice. He said, don't talk about yourself. Don't talk about what policies need to change. Just keep showing up and support the community and tell people you care about them. And I think it's important to start our conversation today acknowledging that I'm thinking about that community, and I know we're all feeling that pain too.
Well, I appreciate what you said, and you did tell that story in the book, and I want to come back to that a little bit later. And we will, I promise, come back to that. So again, here is the book. I want to ask you why you decided to write it. All of us in journalism are cynical enough to be conditioned to think you only write a book like this when you're running for something. So why write this book now, since you're not running for anything now?
I just really didn't have a lot to do. So.
Is that it? Okay, well,
no,
fair point.
No, I wrote the book. The question I get asked the most, whether I'm traveling within Michigan or outside the state, is how do I stay positive? When everything feels so heavy, how do I stay positive? Why do I feel optimistic? Why on earth, after a pandemic, a school shooting, demonstrations for racial justice in the wake of George Floyd's murder, 28 recall attempts I survived, and a plot to kidnap and kill me, why on earth do you want to keep doing this work?
Right.
And that's what I wanted to put out. I knew that this was going to be a tough year. It's a presidential election. It feels so heavy at times. And I thought the things that I've learned that help keep me positive and keep me wanting to do this work and feeling grateful to be here, it's 10 chapters. It's a pretty short book, but it's just 10 things that I've learned in my life and how I've applied them over these last 6 tumultuous years and why I still feel optimistic. And I wanted to put some light out into the world and what I figured was going to be another heavy political year.
Yeah, well, I really enjoyed reading it, and we're going to come in a little while to some of the lessons that you've learned that you're conveying in this book. I want to start, though, with the title. So you say in the book that you never like to be called Gretch. And you have a grandmother named Gretchen who told you once, Gretchen is a pretty name, Gretch is not a pretty word. But it happened organically that you came to be called Gretch and you embraced it. This was during COVID, right?
During COVID, I've grown up in a family where we had lots of nicknames growing up. But during COVID, I got a couple of important nicknames. One was That Woman from Michigan, given to me by the former president. But another one was Big Gretch. All right, I love you too. So Grandma Gretchen hated to be called Gretch. She didn't want me ever to be called Gretch. It rhymes with wretch. It's not pretty. We don't like it. And so I always recoiled with people shorten my name. But during the pandemic, all of a sudden this new nickname, Big Gretch, was floating out there. It was coming out of the city of Detroit. And people were talking about it. And I got someone from Motown here. All right. And I was talking to one of my staff people, a woman, Shaquila Myers, African-American woman from Detroit. And I said, what is this Big Gretch thing? And she's like, oh, you don't understand. The people have accepted you. They love you. They have bestowed this. It's like you got a key to the city being called Big Gretch. And I was like, okay. Because Gretch, I recoil at that. And I don't know many women that want big on the front of their nickname, right? But it's turned into this thing. And then G-Mac Cash, a rapper in Detroit, created a song called Big Gretch. And so Big Gretch is my favorite nickname. And Grandma Gretchen is looking down, rolling her eyes. But you call me Big Gretch, I know we're going to be friends for life.
I love that. So that was during COVID. And, speaking of COVID, you alluded to both the former president referring to you as that woman from Michigan, which was a moment of some notoriety for you outside of Michigan, right? Like all of us became more aware of who you were at that time. But you also talked about the plot to kidnap you and assassinate you, and that is not a laughing matter. That did happen. They, as I read the book, they chanted Heil Hitler at you. They called you Adolf Hitler for your decision to impose restrictions on what people could do during this once-in-a-lifetime pandemic. They had automatic weapons outside your house. I wish you would talk about that. In the book, you talk about this, and it's an incredibly scary moment. And of course, Governor, we're at a time when we have normalized political violence in this country. Yep. This is abnormal. Would you share a bit about that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So, at the beginning of the pandemic, all of us governors were trying to build a plane while we were flying it. We were working together, trying to figure out how do we navigate our states. And one of the things that I think shook me to my core was I was on a call with the nation's governors and Donald Trump. And Detroit, New York, New Orleans, and Chicago were all on fire. We were inundated with COVID cases. Our hospitals were full. We were just desperately trying to get masks and gloves for our doctors and nurses who were wearing them for weeks on end. And we were on this call, and we were asking the president for help. And he said, I am not the nation's shipping clerk. You got to go find these things on your own. And I think that for me was when I just, was stunned and scared. And I thought, well, if I've got to find these things on my own, we got to set up a global procurement operation, and I'm going to go on the national news and ask for help and see maybe I can get help. Yeah. So I did a lot of national television at that time, and I observed that there was not a federal strategy. There's no national strategy, and I needed help getting simple things like masks and gloves. Well, Donald Trump took that personally, and he was very angry about it, and that's when he started targeting me. Up until that point, my overwhelmingly Republican legislature was with me on all the decisions that I had made, but soon as that happened, everything turned upside down. They started rejecting my orders. They started taking me to court to take away my powers so that I couldn't, execute these executive orders. And so everything changed in Michigan. We had demonstrations at our state capitol that looked a lot like January 6th. People showing up with guns and inundating our Capitol, trying to scare the heck out of legislators. They started showing up on my front lawn as well. And, it was during that time that this plot started to get hatched, that some folks who identify as Michigan militia, but I don't call them militia because that sounds like they are an official, important part of our nation. They are domestic terrorists, started getting organized and practicing how they might kidnap me, put me on a trial, and then execute me on television. And that was the plan. And I think that, we saw the former president stoke this over and over again. And I do think that his rhetoric contributed to this. When he tells the Proud Boys to stand by during a presidential debate, he is feeding that. And so the hate that I was getting in Michigan, similar to what Jay Inslee was seeing in Washington State or Andy Beshear in Kentucky, and even Mike DeWine, Republican governor in Ohio, was getting some of the same. And it's unacceptable no matter who it is aimed at. And so when I saw the shooting in Pennsylvania, I was so grateful that he was not killed or hurt beyond, the ear. So sad that a man did die that day. But it's not okay all of a sudden to take on political violence and claim that it's your opponent that's stoking it. This has been fomenting in this country for too long, and it's on every one of us to call it out, for us to hold one another accountable, not just people across the aisle, but within our own parties too. And I think one of the It's really scary when you think about the effort to undermine our confidence in our democratic institutions, the effort to stoke violence against people with whom you disagree, you have political disagreements. I think it's really dangerous, and that's why I have, whether it's against Brett Kavanaugh or it is against Donald Trump or me and my colleagues, we all should be taking a stand and calling it out and demanding that there are repercussions for people that play those games.
Now, what's interesting to me is that you didn't really change your behavior as governor as a consequence of this. If this had happened to any of us, I think we'd understandably be scared, maybe think about doing things a little bit differently. You don't have the luxury of doing that, and that's also not who you are. But you acknowledge in this book that you don't live in fear, but that there's a heightened awareness now, every place you go, that something like this could happen again. That's definitely one impact of things like what happened to you.
Yeah, I've never worried about my safety.
Yeah.
I've got the state police. They do a phenomenal job. I've never felt unsafe personally. But I do worry about my family. I do worry about my staff. I worry about the state police, who's always around me. When someone's targeting me, it puts everyone around me in potential danger. And that's what I worry about. I know that when I go into a big crowd, I'm scanning, I'm thinking about that, and that's something that's really sad to me because I love people. I love showing up. I love going places where it's unexpected and engaging with people. Right. And now I think about it a lot, whether or not that's something that's smart to do.
So as I read this book, I thought there were two moments really in which you became a celebrity, one of one among the governors as opposed to one of many. There are many of us who pay attention to who the governors are around the country who do not know many of the governors, but we all now know you. The attempt on your life, the attempt to kidnap you was one reason. But well before that was the other one. And I was so struck by how movingly and how matter-of-factly you wrote in this book about this. This was back in 2013. You were a state senator at the time. There was a bill before the Senate that would have required women in Michigan to buy extra health insurance for abortion coverage, even in cases of rape and incest, right? As I understand it.
Yes.
If you got pregnant from an assault and you hadn't pre-bought insurance, you were out of luck. Basically, it was requiring women to buy rape insurance.
Yep.
And you made sort of a spur-of-the-moment decision to talk about something that had happened to you that your own father didn't know, that your own daughters did not know. Would you please pick up the story from there?
Yeah, so it was December 11th, 2013, and the only reason I know the date is because my grandma, my beloved grandma, who I opened the book with,
Nina.
turned 100 that day. That was her birthday. And my predecessor, Republican governor in Michigan, had been confronted with similar legislation and vetoed it. And to his credit, I was so grateful that he did. But in Michigan, there's a mechanism that you can collect a certain number of signatures and bypass a governor altogether. You can put an issue right in front of the legislature, and by a slim majority, you can change the law, and the governor can't do anything about it. And so this was their second pass at doing it, but they're first using this mechanism. They didn't hold a single hearing where women or doctors or healthcare providers could testify, and they were jamming this legislation through. I was the Senate Democratic leader. I was the leader of 12 people in a body of 38. And at that time, there were more men named John than women in the Senate.
Yeah, we've had a version of that here, actually, too.
Yeah. And there are all sorts of jokes about Johns in the legislature, but I won't belabor
but you digress,
the point.
right.
But the point is, they didn't want to hear any other opinions. And I had gone to one of my colleagues, a man, he and his wife had been going through IVF, desperately wanted to be parents. She had a miscarriage recently, but it didn't complete at home. She needed to go to the hospital for a procedure. Some call it a DNC. We need to just call it an abortion because that's what it is, and we've done ourselves a disservice calling it different names under different circumstances. It's abortion care. And I wanted him to tell the story because I thought it might resonate with the other side. Here's a man who desperately wants to be a parent, and if this law had been in effect, it would have cost them tens of thousands of dollars for her to get the DNC, the abortion, because they wouldn't have been able to buy this rider. And I thought his story might really resonate. But it was too hard for him to tell it. He couldn't do it. And as I was walking back to my seat, I thought, how can I ask him to bare his soul when I have a story, too, that maybe might make a difference here? And so I went to the microphone, and I started with my prepared remarks, but I set him aside and told the story that I had been raped when I was in college as a freshman. And it was really tough to tell. I hadn't planned on telling it. I actually consulted a couple of my staff people before I did, and I shared with them that I had been raped and I was thinking about talking about it, and they were both shocked. And the woman said, don't tell it. You're not going to make a difference, and you're just going to make yourself vulnerable. And the man said, I got no advice. It's your story. You know, you do whatever you think you need to do. And so the last minute I decided to share the story. And the vote went up, and it went on a party line vote. Actually, one Democrat voted for the legislation. So I had 11 of my colleagues and me vote against it. And I was so depressed. And, we closed out session that evening, and then I realized, oh my God, I got to call my dad and tell him, because this is going to be in the news. And so I did have that phone call, which was so bizarre and hard for both of us, because we're very close, and he didn't have any idea what to say. And then, but the next day, I went into the office, and we had just been inundated by letters and phone calls and emails of people who had a similar circumstance, or were just so grateful that I was willing to fight back and to tell my story in the process. And so while it was a devastating loss, I saw the value in doing it. But I tell this story in the book because it's in the chapter Never Give Up. 10 years later, so in 2013, I never could have imagined I'd be running for governor at some point. But 10 years to the day, as governor, I got to sign the repeal of that legislation. And so I share that because these fights are worth having. We are in the majority on these fights. They take longer than they should, and sometimes they're harder than they need to be. But we showed that day that we are on the right side of the issue, and we didn't give up. And because of that, now women in Michigan have the ability to make their own damn decisions about their own damn bodies.
Governor, I have to tie this to where we are right now. Like, I want to move away from the book for a second and just talk about this issue in this moment, in this election, right? There is an expectation by some that is going to be the issue that is going to turn people out in this election, that ultimately this election may turn on that issue, right? Can you give me, from your perspective as governor, a sense of where you see this issue landing between now and November 5th?
Well, I think Donald Trump's own words over the last couple of weeks tell you he knows that this is an important issue. He's on the wrong side of it, depending on the day. But I do think that this is, we saw in Michigan, so one of the things I love to do is I love to do roundtables. Yep. And we did a lot of reproductive freedom roundtables all across Michigan. In 2022, for the first time, we had fairly drawn districts in our legislature. We had reproductive freedom on the ballot. In the wake of the Dobbs decision, we collected signatures and got reproductive freedom on the ballot. So I did roundtables all across Michigan, and I listened to people, and there were so many occasions where there would be a woman sitting across the table from me, and she'd say, I'm a Republican, and I did not vote for you in 2018, but I am knocking doors for you because you're the only one fighting for my rights. And so we saw people come across the aisle who weren't there 4 years before, and they were animated by this issue. Yeah. When we went to college campuses, I went to a college campus at like an 8 o'clock in the morning on a Friday, and we had 400 students there. We didn't even have free food, but they were motivated because of this issue. And so there's no question in my mind that when Ohio and Kentucky and Kansas make strides on this issue, right, that this is an important moment, and that Kamala Harris, who has been such a great vocal advocate and fighter for these freedoms, I think is going to pull a lot of those people out in this upcoming election, too.
So a ballot initiative in Arizona or a ballot initiative in Nevada, two states that are part of the 7 that likely decide the outcome of this election, you think that's actually good for the vice president?
No question in my mind.
In terms of what will happen?
Yes.
So I want to stay on this question of the particular, what is particular about being a woman. I mean, as a state senator, you tell the story, very moving, and ultimately, as you say, in 10 years, things change. In this book, I kept coming to the difference between being a governor and being a woman governor, observations that you made, a speech you gave where you wore a certain dress and people felt compelled to take to social media and talk about your body and talk about the choice you made of that dress. They would never do that to a man, I guess, unless Barack Obama's wearing a tan suit, right? That's it. Or the school shooting that you referred to earlier that you write about in the book in Michigan after you talked to the governor of Connecticut. And you observe in the book, some people feel a woman governor shouldn't cry because you got emotional, understandably, in that moment. If a man had gotten emotional, no one would find it remarkable. Would you reflect on that a little bit, please?
Yeah, I think that a lot of women in my generation are we were told growing up, never talk too much about yourself, right? Don't ask strangers for money. Wear your best clothes, on Sundays, that kind of thing. Don't stand out. I think about people like Jennifer Granholm, who was governor in Michigan before I was. She was the first governor in Michigan. She wrote in one of her books, or said in an interview, that she was a very attractive woman, and so she cut her hair very short to kind of defeminize her look. She always wore pantsuits. She very rarely wore a dress or a skirt unless it was like a really formal event, to take out the gender as much as possible. And I can show up more as I am because she walked through that. I think about Hillary Clinton walking through the fire before Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris is more free to show up as she is, but I think we still have constraints on us. And I'm always thinking about showing up as I am so that the people that come behind me never even have to think about it, is my goal as a female leader. But I think managing and leading people through crises are tricky. I think that there are some wonderful natural strengths that women have, because I do think we're better positioned to empathize with what's happening with people, but also we have to show a strong, tough exterior. In the wake of when the plot became public, I had to do a press conference, and I decided to wear my leather jacket in that press conference because I thought it made me feel confident, and I think it showed a toughness that was really important to me to convey in that moment when these people were plotting the unimaginable. In the wake of that shooting, a follow-up question was, you seem really personally affected by this, and all I could get out was, I think this is every parent's worst nightmare, because I was thinking about all those parents who were wondering where their kids were, and I've got 2 daughters who, are close in age to the victims, and I got very positive reaction to showing some emotion, whereas I think people who came before me might have paid a price for it. But I did share that because I was thinking about, what does it mean? How will it be interpreted? Stuff that my male counterparts never really, I think, have to struggle with.
And then the thing about how all this kind of comes forward in the book is you write very movingly about the death of your mother, who you describe as a strong woman who took no crap.
Yep.
Right? 2024, if it is anything, is the year of the strong woman who doesn't take any crap, right?
That's right. Yeah, I think so.
In every way, that's manifesting itself. And so it just felt thematically so perfect for this moment against the backdrop of that. So I want to ask you about bipartisanship. So I alluded to Fix the Damn Roads earlier. This has been a part of your story, the Fix the Damn Roads story. Would you tell that story, and then I want to ask you about it. Bridget Bonds is the protagonist of this story. Explain, please, and then we'll talk about what this means.
So in 2016, the presidential election, Donald Trump carried Michigan by 11,000 votes. And I had decided I was going to run for governor in 2018. But when that aftermath of that election, I thought, oh my God, I got to get out there. I got to get organized, and I got to get into every part of the state. Michigan is a big state. I know Texas is a huge state too. But in Michigan, I'm going to get out my Michigan map real quick. We have 2 peninsulas. And when you are on the western end of the upper peninsula, you are as close to Lansing, our state capital, as Lansing is to Washington, D.C. All right, to Washington, D.C. So it's a big state. And I knew if I was going to get into all 83 counties, I had to get started. So I jumped right in after the first of the year. Barack Obama hadn't even left the White House yet. But I'm like, I got to get out there and talk to people and figure out what is going on. And so my favorite thing to do is to just grab some, pop into a coffee shop or sit down with some folks at some event or venue and ask them, I'm running for governor. If I'm fortunate enough to get elected, what could I do that'll make your life better? And then just listen. Not enough politicians listen. Not enough people listen, I think. But I know when I'm listening, I'm learning. And so I like to know what's going on with people, what's happening. And I heard from the Upper Peninsula and the most rural parts of the state to downtown Detroit, fix the damn roads was what people said frequently. And so I started rolling that in. We're going to fix the damn roads. And I ended up running on that slogan, which if you'd asked me before I jumped in if that was something that was possible, I would have thought you were out of your mind. But that's what I heard. And I was in Detroit at Detroit Children's Hospital. And, as a politician walking into a place, some of these places, you're not really invited in, so it can be kind of awkward. But I happened upon a woman and her son in this particular room, and she seemed friendly, and so I introduced myself, and I said, if I'm fortunate enough to get elected, what could I do that'll make your life better? And she looked at me in the eye, and she said, fix the damn roads. And I had not expected that. I thought she would want to talk about health care or child care or education, something about her child who was there. And so I said, okay, tell me why that's your answer. I need to understand this better. And then she explained, Bridget was driving from Flint, Michigan to Detroit every day, back and forth, to see her son in the hospital, and she had 2 other boys at home. And on her commute, she hit a pothole that busted the rim on her wheel. And so she spent a whole day getting her car fixed. She spent hundreds of dollars, which was money out of rent or child care. And most importantly, she missed a whole day with her son in the hospital, who she needed to be with. And so it was that moment for me that really crystallized when the fundamentals aren't working is the people on the bubble who pay the dearest price for it. And so fixing the damn roads is, yes, it's about roads, but it's also about helping the average person be able to take care of their families and live the life that they need and want to live and deserve to live.
And Governor, I'm remembering this anecdote. She was not a Democrat, right?
I have no idea what her...
But she wasn't a supporter of yours, I guess.
Right,
is the
no,
point.
she
Right,
wasn't.
yeah. This is the thing about something like transportation. We say there are no bipartisan issues anymore. Well, roads are not Republican roads or Democratic roads. Like, everybody travels on those roads.
Right.
This is a case where the practical becomes the political, right?
Yeah.
And you have an opportunity to focus on things that matter to everybody regardless of partisanship. And so at a moment when compromise or working with the other side is seen some places as a sign of weakness, what you did was make fixing the damn roads a strength, right? And that ultimately helped you think, get elected.
Without question. Michigan is such a closely divided state, and I won that first election by almost, I think, 9 points. I won that election.
Right.
I bested that in 2022, just so you know.
Just to set the record straight here, I guess. All right. So we talked a couple different times about the parts of this book that are really kind of almost like, here are lessons for people in leadership. And I wrote down a few things that I thought were interesting that people, if they have the opportunity to get the book and spend some time with, that the secret to dealing with bullies is have a thick skin, have a short memory, turn insults into humor, and laugh at yourself. You've done that consistently. You mentioned listening as a big part of it. Surrounding yourself with great people, letting them go is obviously very important, never being afraid to show up. Something you wrote that I thought was so interesting, and the story behind it is great, is always respond with kindness because you'll never regret it. There was a moment, I believe it was 2019, when the majority leader of the state Senate said Governor Whitmer is on the batshit crazy spectrum. Is that right?
Yes.
And you had to make a decision.
I mean, that's what he said. It wasn't right, but that's what he said.
That's what he said. That's what he said. But you had to make a decision, as anybody in that situation has to, and as a lot of people in your position have been. How do I respond to this? Do I take the bait? Do I fight back? But you didn't.
Well, one of the things about being a governor is you've got a GSD, get shit done, as you mentioned in your opener. And I am capable of throwing a counter punch, and sometimes I enjoy doing that, but as governor, it is never a good idea, and it's never a helpful thing, because at the end of the day, you got to get back to the table and deliver a budget and get things done for the people. And so legislators can get away with that a little more easily than a governor can. But this was the Senate Majority Leader. He and I had a pretty fraught relationship, and I was on a trade mission in Israel in 2019, and I got a text message from him, and it said, "You've probably heard the news. I would like an opportunity to apologize to you in person when you return." And I see this, I'm like, what the heck happened? And so then we come to find out that he said this at, in a campus with students in Michigan, and someone recorded it and it was in the news. And, it was such a weird thing to say, first of all. To call someone batshit crazy, but to say I'm on a spectrum, like, that's insulting for so many reasons, right? Because the autism spectrum, like, what was he trying to get at? Was it ableist? Was it just mean? Was it just a goofy combination of words? I don't know. But I returned from Israel and had to figure out how I was going to handle him, and I found out his birthday was coming up. So I sent him a cake, and it had a big bat on it, and it said, "Happy 65th Bat Day." And I laughed at it, and I sent that to him. I took a picture of it, and he responded, in a funny way. But I just made fun of it and laughed at him.
Relationship rebuilt.
Yeah.
Right, to the degree that it needed to be. Another thing you write about in this book is the importance of being a happy warrior. Would you explain why, when you come to a podium like this one, you have SW, MF written at the top of everything?
Yes. I'd love to. This is chapter 10. So,
SW, MF.
Yes. So when I was running for governor in 2018, Emily's List was had my back. They're such a great organization. They were supporting me, and I was getting ready for my first debate. And they sent a debate coach to come and help me prepare. And I was really excited because I love to hone the skills. I love communication. I love a debate. So I was excited to learn what this person was going to bestow on me. Ironically, they sent a male debate coach, which I thought was funny for Emily's List to send to me a male debate coach, but whatever. He was great. He gave me, a number of wonderful tips. One of them was, the happy warrior always wins the debate. So if you can turn off the volume and just watch and see who looks like they're having the most fun, they're almost always the one who wins the debate. So try to remember to be a happy warrior. And his tip was, before any debate, you can't bring notes in, but they always give you blank paper and a pen. So as your opponent's talking, you can make some notes to make sure you hit all your points that you want to. So he said, as soon as you go up there, put a big smiley face at the top of your paper to remind you to smile. Now, what woman has never been told to smile and feels like smiling, right? It has the opposite effect. It irritates me when someone tells me to smile. So I'm like, well, I'm sure as hell not going to do that. And I was trying to think, what would put me in that mindset? And in the meantime, I went to a Kevin Hart show at Little Caesars Arena in downtown Detroit.
I just love this story so much. I know what's coming. I can't wait. I'm sorry. Okay.
And one of his people who writes with him and opens for his shows is a man named Naim Lynn. And he was doing his part on the stage, and he was telling a story about how women are so much bolder today than they used to be. It used to be like if your girlfriend was menstruating and you wanted to see her, she would be very demure and say something to the effect of, my aunt is in town. Meaning Aunt Flo, right? And so that was how she would demurely say she's menstruating. And he's like, women today, they're so much bolder. You call your lady up and say, I want to come over, and she says, you're not coming over. It's Shark Week, motherfucker. And so, like you, that is how I reacted as well. I thought that was hilarious. And I'm like, okay, so when I go to my podium, I'm going to write SWMF to cultivate my happy warrior. And
Great.
we were testing the microphones before the debate started, and we each could invite, 10 or 15 people, and so I had my people on my side, and he had his on his, and they said, would you please test your microphones? He was the sitting attorney general at the time, and so he did his first, and he said, I'm Bill Schuette on duty. That was his tagline, and, no one made a peep. We all watched and we were like, okay. And then they said, and Senator, I was a former senator at the time, and they said, would you test your microphone? And I said, yes, I'm Gretchen Whitmer. Welcome to Shark Week. And everyone laughed because his audience thought I was nuts. And mine knew exactly why I said it, so they were laughing.
So great.
And I think I won the debate before it even started because he was so confused about what was happening.
I love it.
And I was the happy warrior, so yes.
I have to tell you, I bet myself a quarter you would say it. So actually, I'm excited. So I want to move now out of that and talk politics. We have some time left to do that. We'll get to audience questions at the end, but I want to talk politics. So you now have the benefit in Michigan of what they call both the trifecta and the triplex. The trifecta is governor, House, Senate. The triplex is governor, Secretary of State, Attorney General. This has allowed you to do a lot. We think about, divided government is good. The people want divided government. In fact, everything in Michigan, it seems to me, changed the moment that you got the trifecta and the triplex. Here in Texas, we haven't elected a Democrat statewide for 30 years. The Republicans have the trifecta and the triplex and everything else. But in Michigan, you were able to actually move the needle. Talk about that.
So, going into the 22 race, we had a citizens initiative that created a commission to draw our districts. So, for the first time, we had maps that were not gerrymandered. They were fairly drawn. That was a big part of it. We also had an amendment to our Constitution to protect reproductive freedom on the ballot, which was a big draw. And we were really organized from my office down to the local offices. We ran a coordinated campaign unlike anything that's ever been run in Michigan. Yeah. And so because of that, we were going into the election in a really strong position. I will tell you that, going in, the polls had it all over the map. And that's why, as we see all these polls, it makes me nervous to see any poll that says there's a 5-point lead for Kamala Harris in Michigan right now. It's just not true. It's going to be a very close race. I believe we can win it, and I believe we will, but it's going to be very close. Right. But election night, when you end up going to all 83 counties and you listen to people and you build an organization statewide, that's how we ended up flipping both the House and Senate. And so this is the first time in 40 years in Michigan we have a trifecta. It is a 1-seat majority. So that's part of why I'm fixing the damn roads, because I can't afford for any of them not to make it to work.
But at the same time, even with a 1-seat majority, again, you've been able to put an aggressive agenda that aligns with your values.
Yep,
you've been able to make things happen.
We have. Michigan, we got on the right side of, civil rights for LGBTQ plus community. We were able to get rid of trap laws that made it harder for women to access abortion care in Michigan. We were able to get the Crown Act signed into law. We feed all 1.4 million Michigan public school students breakfast and lunch every single day. We got, in the opening, we talked a little bit about gun policy. We were able to get background checks and red flag laws and secure storage in Michigan done. So we've been delivering on the agenda on which we ran. Always mindful, though, that it is a 1-seat majority. And so where we can find bipartisan support, we strive always to do that, because in order to sustain this work, we've got to make sure that we've proved it out, that this is what's good not just for the Michigan economy, but for all the people that call Michigan home.
And this really gets to the question I want to ask you about Michigan itself. It's a swing state. Full stop, right? 2016, super close. 2020, super close. As you point out, CNN had a poll out this week that had the vice president up by 5 points. You don't believe it? I think, honestly, anybody who sleeps on this election between now and Election Day is crazy, given the way we've seen elections happen in the past. You have to assume it's a very, very close election. What is it about Michigan specifically that makes it such a swing state? Why is it so close?
Well, one of the wonderful strengths about Michigan and one of the challenges is we are the most diverse swing state in the country. Michigan benefited from the auto industry and brought people from the South, from the Middle East, from Holland. People came from all around the globe for a job on the line at Ford Motor Company or General Motors. And it was a guarantee to the middle class where you could take care of your family. You could even buy a place up north because you were paid a salary that could sustain a family and a good quality of life. And so that's kind of how our population grew over the years, and that's part of who we are. We are a microcosm of the country. And I do think, in Michigan, over my lifetime, we take big swings. We've had 12 years of a Republican governor, and then we had term limits, so 8 years of a Democrat, and then 8 years of Republican, then 8 years of a Democrat. So it is a state that is notoriously kind of independent. We split our ticket a lot. Yep. And that's who we are in Michigan. And I think that is a great strength. I think it's important to have robust dialogue and different points of view. And I think that over the years that has served us well. I do think right now with all the different pressures that are happening in our political rhetoric and with social media, et cetera, that it makes it a lot more challenging to find that common ground. And that's something that I'm concerned about. But in 2016, Hillary Clinton lost to Donald Trump by 11,000 votes. Right. Jill Stein was also on our ballot and won by earned more than 11,000 votes. So in Michigan right now, we have Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, and we have 3 other people on the ballot. CNN didn't test for that. And that's why as we see these polls, I'm telling everyone, don't get comfortable on any. You cannot sleep on Michigan.
So the 3 others on the ballot, I'm assuming, are Jill Stein,
Cornel West, and Kennedy.
West, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who I believe is suing the state of Michigan to get off the ballot. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, and up to this point, he's on the ballot until he's not.
The court ruled he's not coming off the ballot.
He's not coming off the ballot.
No.
And we don't know honestly where those extra party candidates, where they're going to take from.
Right.
Right.
Jill Stein definitely took from Hillary Clinton.
So it's going to be a cliffhanger again.
I think so. I think it's going to be very close.
If you gave the vice president one piece of advice, Governor, about how to win Michigan, what would it be? One piece of advice.
I think it's let Kamala be Kamala. I really do believe that so many politicians get all tied up in knots because they're trying to be this for that audience and this for that audience, and they lose themselves. And I think that she's a great leader. She is very personable, and she's lived a normal life like Americans have. She's worked hourly jobs. She has had a family that struggled at certain points over their lifetimes. I mean, she is the real deal, and I think showing up just as she is incredibly powerful. I don't know that her opponent has ever worked an hourly job. I don't know that he's ever taken care of a family member or gone to a school event for a child. I just think people can identify with her, and I'm sensing that reaction already, just even though it feels like she's been in the race for a long time, she really hasn't, at this juncture. The switch didn't happen that long ago, and so showing up and showing up as she is, I think
authentically. Okay, so two more questions, and then we're going to have one of my colleagues come out and we're going to ask questions on behalf of the audience. What's with you? So everybody presumes that you will run for president either in 4 years should the vice president lose, or in 8 years if the opportunity presents and she serves. She serves 2 terms, right? You know that we're talking about you.
Despite my best efforts.
Yes. You, in fact, made the statement during the time when she was considering running mates that you wanted to be taken out of consideration for it. You're going to stay in Michigan. Peace on that. But now, what happens next?
Well, I'm going to just talk about that for a second because I did not take my name out of it because I don't think America's ready for two women, because we are, right?
Well, you never said that.
Right.
Yeah.
Some people said, oh, that's why. That has nothing to do with it. Every one of us, my Attorney General, Secretary of State, and I were all told, you can't all be on the ticket. We can't have too many women on the ticket. And we all ignored it, won our races, and also got reelected. So if we can do it in Michigan, we can do it as a country without a question in my mind. I have made a commitment to serve out my term in Michigan. And, I think a lot about my buddy Tim Walz, who is absolutely one of my favorite colleagues. He is the one governor who I used to say swears more than me, but I think that's changed. But, you think about him. In the span of like 3 weeks, he and his whole family decided to jump into this event that is going to change their lives for the rest of all of their lives. It's a huge deal. It's a big sacrifice. It's an honor without question. But it's also, every person in his family is now in something that could change the rest of their lives, and had to make that decision in the span of a few weeks.
Yep.
It's incredible when you think about it.
Right.
Why is my name always out there? Well, I'm from a very important swing state. I have managed to get myself elected and reelected by double digits twice in this swing state. I'm 53, and I don't play games. I call it as I see it, and I think that's something that, for whatever reason, has resonated with folks too. But beyond that, it beats the hell out of me.
Well, but you could sit here and say, I'm not going to do it. You're considering it.
No, you know what? What are you going to do in 8 years?
Let me, I know what I'm not going to do. All right, Governor, last question. So there's a football game. There's a football game on Saturday, right? Okay. I just want to check with you.
Oh, there's some Wolverines here. All right.
We're going to send Ted Cruz to Michigan to root for Michigan. Is that okay? Actually,
think about that.
Are you okay with that? What's the final score going to be on Saturday?
All right, let me start with this. I am a Michigan State Spartan.
I understand.
I am the mother of Wolverines, and I am the governor of the Wolverine state. So
Right.
I will say that the game's at the Big House, which is in Michigan's favor.
Yeah.
Michigan is the reigning national champions. I will let everyone know. That said, they don't have the same coach, the same quarterback, or most of the same starting team. So I think it's going to be a spirited competition, and
Wow. Okay.
And I think Michigan State will win their game this weekend. We have a bye, I think, right?
That's quite an answer. All right. So I'm going to invite my colleague, Darla Cameron, who's the Chief Product Officer of the Text Tribune, out to ask questions on behalf of the audience that were pre-submitted. Darla, welcome.
Hey, thank you all for submitting your questions. The first one, Democrats seem to have finally jettisoned the they go low, we go high philosophy and started punching back. Why now, and why has it been so effective?
Oh, you know what? I remember going to the 2016 convention in Philadelphia. I drove out there with my daughters in the car with me, and they were, I think, 12 and 13. And we sat and watched Michelle Obama give that speech. And I remember on the drive out there thinking, my daughters, for their whole cognizant lives, have only known a black president. And here we are on the precipice of a woman president. And I remember thinking, growing up in this country, I was never sure either of those things could happen. And this was going to be their formative existence. Like, how amazing. And then obviously 2016 went in a different direction, and here we are on the precipice again. I loved Michelle Obama's speech this year. It was a very different tone than it was in 2016. She and her family have felt so much of the hate that Donald Trump has sowed over this decade he's been in politics. And I think that it is important that we don't talk above people and talk, around the hard stuff that's happening, but we take it on. And I think that was the spirit. I don't think it's that we're going to go right in the gutter and be as bad and as mean and as horrible, but that we are going to be tough, and we are going to look it in the eye, and we are going to take it on and call it out and offer a very different vision. And I think that that's 100% how we should always be looking at elections.
But of course, the vice... I will say, Governor, the vice president's strategy in dealing with the former president, at least in this period of time that she's been the nominee, has been to needle him and to try to get under his skin, which no one has either attempted successfully or attempted at all previously. And look, objectively, it sort of seems to be working. And there's discussion about the debate coming up on Tuesday that, in fact, her strategy going into that debate will be to try to get under his skin again. Would that be your strategy as well?
Well, I can tell you, some of the misogynistic bullies that I've dealt with over my career, I have found that there is a phrase that is really effective, and it is, I think you're letting your emotions get the better of you. So I would like to see that.
All right. Darla.
All right. Texas has dramatically low voter turnout. Are there lessons from Michigan we can learn to get more people civically involved here?
So I'm really proud to say that in 2022, we had the highest youth voter turnout in the country. It was such a wonderful thing to see young people. With this new trifecta, we have done a number of things on top of the litany of things I listed earlier. We've also made it, we codified a lot of election rights that people had during COVID out of necessity. No reason absentee voting, making it easier for people to drop off their ballots. You can vote in person in Michigan 9 days before the election now, making it easier for people who are working or have to figure out childcare, et cetera. So making it easier for young people to register to vote on election day and cast their ballot at that same time. We've done that in Michigan, too.
Governor, you're telling me that if you make it easier for people to vote, voter turnout goes up? Really?
I think there's a cause and effect. Yeah.
You do?
Yeah.
What advice do you have for young women who want to pursue a future in politics?
Jump in, right? I mean, it is, I got to tell you, as hard and as the challenges have been, I am so grateful to have been in the legislature and now to be governor of Michigan. As hard and tough as it can be, I know the work that I'm doing is making a difference, and I can see it every day. And part of the reason that I have never been inclined to go to Washington, D.C. while I had opportunities at the state level is because at the state level, you can see your work in action. Getting into schools and talking to kids or principals, what free breakfast and lunch has meant, it's like, that's why I do this work. That's what I love about it. And I could have done a lot of other things that would have been more lucrative, but I can't imagine any other thing that I could have done that would give me such joy and pride and satisfaction than serving in this capacity. It is hard, knocking doors and having conversations with strangers and talking about yourself and sharing your vision. It's hard. They're long, hard days some days. But man, it is the best profession I could have asked for, and I hope anyone who's thinking about it might consider jumping in. And every one of us has a role to play, whether you are the candidate or you are the brains of the campaign or you are the policy expert that informs the work that the candidate and office holder does. Every one of us can play that role. I talk to my own kids. They are passionately involved. They both have sworn they will never run for office, but they will always play a role because they see what kind of joy I've taken from this job. It's really a remarkable opportunity to do a lot of good and feel good about the work you do.
But of course, Governor, you point out earlier, we talked about the threats that you had to endure as governor. And in Texas, where we have a part-time legislature, people who serve are paid $600 a month for their service, right? We create all kinds of conditions that sometimes make it harder, I hear from women in the legislature, particularly for women to run. The permission structure in terms of the process is just not there. Are there things we need to do to create a circumstance in which women feel like they're being given more of an opportunity alongside men to serve? I wonder about that.
Yeah, well, I think, emulating Michigan, it is hard, and we don't make it easier for women in any workplace, frankly, easy enough to support childcare, to make create the flexibility and the health care that we need, the ability to make enough to take care of your family. We end up in states where you aren't paid a real salary. You end up with, a legislature that is beholden to whomever is paying their salary, and often it's it's men who are wealthy that end up being the legislators, and you get agendas that don't reflect the needs of working women in the state. And so I think creating organizations that support women who are running, helping women train, giving them the kind of logistical support that they need, I think is really important if we're going to diversify and increase our ranks in legislatures all across this country, and that's really important.
Great. Couple more, Darla.
Great. You mentioned Mike DeWine admirably. Who are other Republican governors who you feel are serving their states well?
So it's always dangerous for someone from Michigan to say anything positive about someone from Ohio. But, Mike and I got to know each other pretty well during the pandemic. The Midwestern governors had regular check-ins. We were really important to helping one another. Eric Holcomb from Indiana has become a friend as well. Tony Evers, Tim Walz, J.B. Pritzker were all a part of that group too. And of course, I was the one that organized the meetings. I wonder why. But, I'm grateful. When the plot became public, Charlie Baker, the Republican who was governor of Massachusetts at the time, was one of the first people to call me and check in. And we didn't really know one another well, but he cared and he reached out. Larry Hogan, the former governor of Maryland, was someone who also was passionate about infrastructure. We built a good friendship because, we're both focused on fixing those kind of problems. So I feel fortunate that I've gotten to know a handful of my Republican colleagues over the years. One of the sad things I think right now is, our National Governors Association. Spencer Cox is the head right now. He's from Utah. He's a great guy too.
And really cares about bipartisanship.
Yep.
As these kind of governors do or don't, he does.
He does. He's got a lot of work to do on his own party though, because they're not participating as much as they used to. And I don't know if it's kind of a Trump effect right now, if it's frowned upon or what, but the strength of our organization has been the bipartisanship of it. Asa Hutchinson from Arkansas was someone who was the leader of our organization. He and I are doing a panel in New York in a couple of weeks talking about civility. We've always had a good relationship. We disagree on probably 90% of policy issues, but he's a statesperson, and I respect him.
Good.
Thanks. You said you never envisioned yourself where you are now. What was the inflection point that put you on this current path?
So, when I went to college at Michigan State, I thought I was going to be a sports reporter, was my original plan. And my dad, in his wisdom, he had worked in Mitt Romney's dad's administration. His dad was governor of Michigan, George Romney. My dad worked for him. And so my dad understood state government very well. And he said, Gretchen, the state capitol is right down the street from Michigan State. Go do an internship. Go see what state government's like. So few people even understand how it works. And you have a golden opportunity. You can do an internship, and maybe you hate it and you learn something. Maybe you like it. You never know. And so, I listened to him, and I went and did this internship and really fell in love with public policy. I took a job full-time with the State House Democrats after I graduated from Michigan State. We were in a tie at the time. It was the only time in Michigan history we've had 55 Republicans and 55 Democrats in our state house. And they came up with an agreement where every other month they switched who was speaker and who was the chair of all the committees. So you didn't have one party jamming their agenda down the other's throat. It was, okay, if I treat them wrong this month, they're going to return it next month. And that was when I got to learn, how government should work. I think it was the best time in history, actually, when it did work very well in Michigan. The next election, we went into the minority. I knew as low person, ranking low person, that I was going to be one of the people cut loose. And I'd already applied to law school. I knew I was going to go to law school, but I'd been putting it off. And I thought, all right, now it is time to pursue my legal career. And I was practicing law for a couple years, and a friend of mine called and said, your state representative is term limited. You should think about running. And I had never thought of myself as a candidate. But I kind of looked at the field, and I talked to both my parents. They'd been long divorced, but each of them was like, you would be fantastic at it. And I was like, really? And I decided to throw my hat in, because I looked at the field and I thought, I can do as good a job, if not better, than most of the people that are running. Maybe I will do this. And that's really how I got started, and I loved it. And when I left the legislature, I had served 14 years. I was in the minority the whole time. I got my teeth kicked in for 14 years. And I thought, I'm term limited. I'm going to go into the private sector, and that was my public service career. But the Flint water crisis became known. The horrible situation that happened by virtue of decisions that were made at our state capitol. The community got lead in their water. It was horrific. And I was looking again at the field of people that were rumored to be running for governor, and I thought, none of them has even served in the legislature. I know how to operate. I can fix this. And that's why that was really the primary motivation for me running for governor in 2018.
All right, we'll do one last question.
How do you frame the stakes of the 2024 presidential election to Americans?
It's Shark Week.
That's it. Yeah. If ever there was a mic drop moment at the end of one of these, that was actually just it. Darla, thank you very much. Please give Governor Gretchen Whitmer a big hand. Thank you. We'll see you this weekend. I thought that was really